I'm gonna kind of freestyle this one too, but like doing God's will versus doing your own will, or even you could do Satan's will. You could even do like yeah, like there's different wills you can do. Like, but you want to do God's will. That's what I'm into. I'm into doing God's will. I'm into doing what God called me to do, and what God is leading me to do in the spirit too. At that, like I'm into that stuff. I'm into doing what God called me to do and following God's will. That's what I'm really into. I'm not into, oh yeah, let's follow Satan's will and my own will. You know, and everything I do, I'm into following basically like I said, God's will. So everybody, they into following their own will, they into following their own stuff, they going down their own path. And you understand, like a lot of people may think, they're winning by going down their own path. Like, but you understand, they're not following God's will. So how is that actually winning? You know? And you understand, like, how is the devil supposed to deceive them, make them think that they're winning by going down their own will? And you have a bunch of people going down their own will, and they want to attach God and the spiritual things to them doing their own will. But they're doing their own will. They're not doing God's will. They're not doing what God calls people to do. What God calls people to do. Like, they're not doing that. So, you know, you have a bunch of people doing their own will, and then they want to add God into their mess, and bully God into saying that, oh yeah, their will is God's will, when they're just following their own will. They're not even following God's will. And that's what you see in Christianity. That's what you see in religion. Everybody trying to attach God to their will instead of just doing God's true will. And obviously, God has to have an interest in you. God has to choose you in order for you to even be able to do His will. So doing God's will is not even for everybody. Like, that's the truth, because God doesn't pick everybody. So yeah, but so yeah, people can't do God's will if He has to choose you to for you to do His will, and you have to be chosen and picked by Him and predestined by Him. So not everybody can just wake up and do God's will, because you understand, like you can become a pastor, you can go to Bible seminary school or whatever you think, like you can go to church, whatever you think, but that's not God's will. That's not God's will. That's not God's will. God's will is for His chosen people. It's for the people He picked and ordained to walk with Him. And sorry, but the majority of people, I'm sorry to say this, but the majority of people, 99.99% of people, aren't even chosen to do God's will. So how the hell can they? Yeah, understand that means we're gonna have a bunch of people, that's gonna that acts like they're doing God's will when they're not, because you gotta understand, they're not chosen. God's not raising these people up. So how can you do God's will if God ain't even choosing you to do His will? God ain't giving you a purpose. God ain't giving you a meaning to do His will. And that's just the harsh truth. Like, people don't want to hear that truth, but that's just what the truth is. Like, you know, so we supposed to do God's will, but at the same time, we, as followers of God, we can't expect everybody to just want to. We can't expect people to want to do God's will with us. We can't expect that. We probably should expect them to just be evil, be weird, or just reject it. So, like with me, my situation, yeah, I've reached out to people trying to get them to do God's will with me, and pretty much the majority of them rejected it. So, but that's what God had to show me, you know, how everything be too. At that, God had to show me that, yeah, He's just not interested in using them. He's not interested in using them for His purpose and for His glory and for His will, and because you gotta understand, God's not into everybody. God's not into you know choosing everybody. God's not into you know having everybody work for Him, and that's the truth. That's just the truth. Like, people gotta just accept that. they probably just meant to burn in hell. Like people just gotta accept that. People just gotta accept maybe they're just meant to, you know, I don't know, barely make it to heaven if if they somehow make it off of mercy. Some people that may not be against God, but I don't know, just don't even make it off of works. Like that's crazy. But yeah, like certain people may make it to heaven based off of just mercy. But me, like that's what I'm saying. Like I'm making my shit off my works and off of everything I've done. I'm not gonna sit here sell out to no, I'm not gonna sell out to just make it off of mercy and stuff. No, I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, like if people think they can take their chances with that, then go ahead, take your chances and don't do nothing for God. But yeah, but me, like that's what's kind of been my issue too with people too. Is like nobody just wants to do God's will, and I just accept it. I just accept that they just meant to do their own will and go down their own path, and you know some of them may luck out and make it off of mercy. I don't know. It depends. But yeah, like the majority of them ain't gonna make it off of mercy. Like the majority of them ain't. And I have prayed for some people too. I pray for some people that God led me to. But other than that, like yeah, so the blood ain't on my hands. 'Cause I already try to help everybody, you know, get into God's will. But what I gotta understand too, like even though God showed me those things and told me what to do, it doesn't mean God is gonna have interest in them. God just showing me different things on like how how it feels and how he operates and how everything really is too. With that stuff too. So it's like with God's will. I'm gonna look at it. But like that's kind of what I say too. Like you know God's will isn't going to church. God's will ain't being into religion. Ain't calling yourself a Christian. And to be honest, like for these people, God's will ain't even for them to read their Bible because they don't even know what they're not even risen up by God to even know what the Bible even is talking about. To even they apply things that's not even meant for them. So you gotta understand it has to be meant for you. All that stuff has to be meant for you. Like that's just the truth. Like you can't even go against the devil if you gotta say you can go against the devil, but if you're not following God and you're going against, Hollywood or certain things, like, um, yeah, it's like it's just but yeah, you're not even chosen by God yourself. So it's like you're not even in God's calling your damn self. So it's like people judge other people. You gotta understand, but you gotta understand, like, God's will is not for everybody. God's will is only for His chosen people. And if you're not His chosen people, you probably shouldn't be speaking nothing about against Hollywood celebrities or against if you're not if God ain't using you and you see these people want to act like God is using them as that too. These Christians, you gotta understand, how can God use a Christian? How can God use a religious person? Religion has nothing to do with God. So church has nothing to do with God. That has to do with what people want to just do them themselves. You know, you know, God ain't supposed to be a side dish or what do you call it? Just a side thing. No, God's supposed to be the main shit, the main quest or whatever you call it. Like God, you gotta understand, like you ain't supposed to go to church and think, oh yeah, I'm following God, or you ain't supposed to call yourself a Christian. No, you're supposed to live this shit on a daily basis for God. You're supposed to live this shit on a daily basis. That's the way it should be. But that's kind of what I want to say too about God's will is that not everybody's meant to do God's will. Not everybody's chosen to do God's will, and that's just what we gotta accept too. Is like the majority of people will end up in hell because they're not meant to do God's will. You know, you know, they're just meant to be stuck in you know their life, their own life too, then do what they want to do and do their own will. And I understand like Christianity and religion and church, that's all people's own will. That's the world's will. That's the different wills too at that. Like the world has its own will. Satan has his will for these people, and you understand like you just can't um do your own will and expect to, you know, gain some type of, I don't know, like what they think they're trying to gain from doing their own will. But I mean, I'll be honest. Like some people, like by them doing their own will, they may gain some type of blessing, some type of like earthly rewards or some stuff too. Which I'm not down in that. I'm just saying, they're still doing their own will. They basically made it based off of doing their own will, and that's the truth. Like God will let people make it out of the ghetto doing their own will or doing Satan's will at that too, or you know, and you understand it's called a contract with Satan at that point. So if now I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's literally how it is. It's like people make it out based off of doing their own will instead of God's will, and we don't really see people making it out doing God's will. We don't really see people like that making it out doing God's will. We see a bunch of people making it out doing their own will or doing Satan's will or doing the world's will or whatever. Like that's what we see. We don't really see like, oh, true followers of God who's doing God's will making it out. We just don't see that stuff really happening. And we're kind of in the stages of that right now. It's like God's people like me, like I'm trying to make it out by doing God's will. I'm trying to be one of the first ones to make it out by doing God's will in these times. So that's just me, like, and I'm talking about like financially and everything too, being set for life financially and being up there to where I'm able to, live, free and not have to worry about no type of struggle or none of that stupid stuff. Yeah, I'm trying to, be one of God's people to make it out doing his will and help other God's people make it out too. Like, cause you understand, if I'm making it out, I'm gonna be helping God's people make it out. I'm not gonna be trying to help a bunch of people that ain't into God's will, ain't into doing God's will. No, I can't. I'm not gonna curse myself helping a bunch of people that ain't even into God's will. You know, I just don't want. I just me like I'm not into all those things. I'm into only helping and helping God's people make it out. You know, and people that accept the truth and actually roll with the truth and roll with God and love His kingdom. Those are the people I fuck with that I want to help make it out with. You know, and those are the people I'm gonna help with. By making it out. And you understand, we see a world full of people. You understand, there's a lot of gatekeeping in it too, though. I'll be honest, like with the way making it out of everything too, there's a lot of gatekeeping. So it's like, if I'm trying to make it out and be rich and successful, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, in whatever ways, whatever way God ordains it. But at the same time, like, yeah, like these people just there's a lot of gatekeeping. I'm trying to say there's a lot of gatekeeping, and yeah, like there's a lot of gatekeeping with this shit. Like there's a lot of gatekeeping. But you know about making it out and stuff like that too. And you know, I feel like yeah, the majority have to be sellouts in order to make it out too. That's what I want to say too. Um, but yeah, that's kind of want to add in there too. Basically just to mention that. But see, what was the topic again, man? I fucking forgot the topic. But yeah, like basically, I was saying like yeah, it's like yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. All right, okay. So this is the part two. Like, what will you do? Will you do God's will, your own will? So that's kind of what I want to freestyle a little bit more too about too. Is like, yeah, we have a bunch of people doing their own will and doing Satan's will or the world's will, but nobody's really doing God's will on this earth. And that's the sad thing about it. Is like nobody really wants to get dirty and do God's will. Nobody wants to step in the mud and do God's will. And that's just the world we're living in. That's the world we're living in. We're living in a world full of people who don't want to do God's will, who too scared, who too petrified, who can't handle the heat. Who can't handle the heat of doing God's will. Like, and that's what people do, is just um go against God's will at that too. Like they even go against God's will. You know, people even go against God's will, and people go against people who doing God's will. And that's the sick part about it too. Is like, you know, all God's people trying to do is better themselves, better their life, and better other people who deserve it. And you know, that's basically in God's will for us to do that stuff. So it's like, I understand, because like we are chosen by God. So it's like we don't deserve to be, bashed by society and bashed by the world. We don't deserve all that stuff. We deserve to be free to do God's will. And part of doing God's will is we're gonna get attacked by the enemy. We're gonna get attacked by Satan. We're gonna get attacked by all these, you know, demonic spirits or whatever it may be. Like, we're gonna get attacked by people, and that's just part of God's will. That's just part of God's calling. Is these cats are fighting, but I don't even know what the hell that was. But yeah, like no, I'm just saying, like, that's just throwing me off. But I heard like a cat screech. But yeah, yeah, doing God's will. That's what it's about. That's what it's about, is doing God's will. And people forget that that's where you're really gonna get blessed. All these people, like I said, like, they may get blessed by doing their own will, doing Satan's will, or doing the world's will, whatever it may be. But like me, I'm gonna get my blessings. That's gonna be eternal, and even more by doing God's will. I'm gonna get the best. It's just you gotta go through more. You gotta go through more tests. You gotta go through more struggle. You gotta go through. Yeah, it's like, you know, God ain't gonna make it easy. Doing God's will ain't gonna be easy. It ain't supposed to be easy because it's God's will. And you understand, like, with what we're facing, what God's people are facing, like, we're facing a lot of craziness. We're facing a lot of craziness in this world. We're facing a lot of, you know, we're just facing too much, like, that it kind of is. It's just hard to bear sometimes too. Like me, in my situation, like, it's hard to bear these situations I'm going through. But I'm continuing doing God's will. I'm not trying to be praised for doing the wills of this world, or the wills of Satan, or the wills of whatever it may be. Like, no, I'm trying to do God's will and make it out doing God's will. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I deserve. I deserve love. I deserve, making it out and getting blessed and getting to the promised land and getting to all these blessings. I deserve all that stuff. I deserve all that stuff, and because I am, doing God's will, and I am a great person for God to at that. So it's like I deserve all that stuff, and I know my rights. By me doing God's will, by me being chosen. And like I said, not everybody is chosen to be able to do God's will. Not everybody God picks to do His will. You know, these people say they're doing God's will. They're not doing God's will. If they're doing God's will, they wouldn't be into Christianity. They wouldn't be into religion. They wouldn't be into all that, the white Jesus. They would be into the red light Jesus. They would promote the truth. But that's the way it is. And they wouldn't sell out to the system, to the agenda. You understand? These people act like they of God or something, but they sold out to the agenda. They sold out to the system. They sold out to they basically sold out to Satan and his matrix and his system. So how are these people actually doing God's will? They're not. They're not. They're doing their own will. They're even doing Satan's will. Like, the majority of these people are doing Satan's will, and they're following down their own path. They're not following God's path. And people are just not meant to. Like I said, like, people are just not meant to follow God's path. People are not meant to follow the narrow path, or whatever you want to call it, or just do what's right and stick up for what's right. And that's the way it is too. Like, people are so mentally gone. They literally think they're doing God's will by following the devil or something. Like, all that religious stuff, you following the devil in that stuff. You ain't following God's will. Like, so that's what I want to say too. And then yeah, it's like, you also got to follow Jesus' will, the real black Jesus' will too, and what Jesus is calling us to do too at that, because Jesus even calling us, His people, to do things as well too. So I can't forget that. I can't forget to mention that as Jesus' will for us too, because Jesus even has a will that He has, and what He wants, and what He treasures, and what He adores too. Whatever it is. Obviously I'm not being perfect in speech, but I'm just saying, like, Jesus has His his views too on everything too. Like Jesus the perfect one too. We all know that, but like he even views stuff differently than God. So Jesus has his own, you know, ways of thinking. Because he's not God. Jesus ain't God. Jesus is just what is it? The Son of God? Is that what they call it? I don't know. Jesus, but basically Jesus is, yeah, Jesus is the Messiah. That's his role. His role ain't to be the creator. You know, Jesus is obviously Jesus' role is to be the King of Kings to it that too. Obviously we know that, but at the same time, God is above Jesus, and God is the creator. So, but there's a thing called doing Jesus' will for your life too. God's will and Jesus' will for your life. So there's that too. So that's kind of what I want to add in there. So much love, peace.